Sinister Stories.
Raindrops cascaded down the windshield as Rick maneuvered through the city streets, the drumming sound on the roof of his car in sync with his racing heartbeat. The glow of traffic lights blurred in the stormy night, but urgency fueled his every move. Beside him, Greta clutched her bleeding arm, the result of a dinner preparation gone awry. Red lights and stop signs were mere suggestions as Rick sped toward the hospital, each second ticking away in his mind like an ominous countdown. The city, bathed in the soft glow of wet asphalt, felt deserted, a stage set for an unfolding drama. At last, the hospital loomed in the distance, its lights beckoning like a sanctuary. Rick pulled up to the entrance, only to find the front door out of commission. A valet, draped in rain-soaked attire, emerged, explaining the situation. Rick was frantically trying to explain to the nurse that his wife cut her arm very deep, but the nurse was still calmly insisting for them to sit down and she will be right with them. As soon as they sat, one of the other couples was called, so Rick and Greta figured they were moving quickly. Hours stretched and the nurse, who had promised a swift return, vanished. An unsettling stillness engulfed the waiting room, broken only by Rick's rising impatience. Almost 2 hours had passed and still nothing from anyone. The nurse had not returned. The other couple looked at Rick and shrugged. Rick stated, "I don't know what's happening." She said she would be right back. Just then, 2 nurses entered the waiting room and called the other couple. Rick was obviously becoming very impatient at this time. The nurses relayed to Rick that they were very busy tonight. Rick looked around the empty waiting room and replied, "Busy? There is no one here." But the 2 nurses had already left with the other couple. Another hour had passed, and Rick was really furious at this point. So Rick got up and walked over to the double doors to the emergency room. As he was about to walk through, a nurse and 2 orderlies walked through, asking Rick to sit down, please. They stated that there was no unauthorized people allowed beyond this point. Rick was livid at this point and demanded his wife receive treatment promptly. The nurses obliged and took his wife in a wheelchair, then stopped Rick from going with her. The orderly, whom had a crooked smile with almost yellow teeth, repeated that there was no unauthorized personnel beyond this point. Rick shouted why the other couples were allowed to go together. The orderlies stared upon the nurse with empty eyes. The nurse raised her chin and stated with grin that his wife will be fine, and that she'll be out before you know it. Rick, who was very upset at this point, halted when Greta relayed to Rick, "Just calm down and I'll be back soon. Besides, she has her phone so she'll text him when she sees the doctor." So Rick sat down and waited. Another hour had passed and no text from his wife. Then Rick realized the no other couples had returned from the back and no one else had come into the emergency room. Rick started texting his wife with no reply, then he started calling her phone with no answer. Rick was fed up at this point and rushed to the back past the double doors. When he went through, he noticed something strange. There was no one there. The hallway looked abandoned, as if it had never been used. Rick, armed with the feeble glow of his phone's flashlight, ventured into the surreal void that the hospital had become. His calls for Greta echoed through empty corridors, devoid of life or any semblance of medical activity. Perplexed, he pressed forward, desperation mounting with each unanswered shout. After a series of twists and turns, a distant sound reached Rick's ears. Investigating, he found a man stirring on a bed in a darkened room. To his astonishment, it was the husband from the couple preceding his own arrival at the hospital. The man, disoriented and alarmed, shared a similar experience. A mysterious pinch, followed by an abrupt awakening in a sterile environment. He asked if his wife was okay, but Rick didn't know where his wife was. The man jumped out of the bed and frantically searched the room as if his wife was hidden somewhere. Rick tried to calm him down and let the man know that he also was looking for his wife. They started to looking around the hospital room and found nothing of use. The 2 men, now united by a shared plight, embarked on a fruitless search within the room. Panic fueled their footsteps as they traversed the dimly lit corridors, each turn revealing a scene darker and more ominous than the last. An abandoned ambulance garage, stripped of its usual life-saving vehicles, heightened Rick's anxiety. Rick feared there may have been one, and had already left. But if that wasn't the case, then maybe both their wives could still be in the building. A door was then spotted by the men, less dusty than its surroundings, beckoned them, and upon opening it, Rick found himself transported to a bustling hospital corridor. His confused cries for help drew the attention of a nurse who sternly informed him of his unauthorized presence. Rick, undeterred, pleaded for his missing wife. The nurse took Rick to the security desk, where Rick frantically explained to the officer that they lost their wives in the other waiting room on the other side of the hospital. The security guard looked confused and explained that the other side was completely closed off due to renovations. It had been closed for the last few months. And then the security looked around again and said to Rick, "What do you mean, our wives?" Rick turned around and realized the other husband was not there. Rick wondered where he was. Did he leave the abandoned garage? Rick tried to head back to the door that led to the other side of the hospital, but security would not allow it. Efforts to return to the mysterious side of the hospital were thwarted by security. Forced outside, Rick witnessed a locked entrance with a chain and padlock. Fueled by determination, he shattered a window to re-enter the hospital, convinced that the perpetrators must still lurk within. Rick figured if the other husband with whom he not get his name had been taken, the ones responsible must still be in the hospital, so his wife could still be there. Floor by floor, Rick scoured the building, discovering a strange figure on the top floor rummaging through files. Armed with a makeshift weapon, Rick confronted the intruder, demanding information about Greta's whereabouts. The strange man was quite large. Using his makeshift weapon, he swung as hard as we could at the man's legs, then repeatedly hit his arm to detain him. Rick grabbed the large stranger and frantically and continuously questioned the man about where his wife was. "Where is Greta?" he forcefully repeated. Rick then started hitting the man in the face until the large man finally gave up and told Rick that they were in the basement. Rick didn't have anything to bind the man, so in his rage, he cocked back, swung the pipe right at the man's head, knocking him unconscious. Descending to the basement, Rick encountered men in hospital gowns and surgical masks. His cautious exploration led him to a room containing 3 body bags. The dread he felt intensified as he approached. He slowly made his way to the bags. Fearfully, he knelt down next to the bags, fearing what he might find. He then noticed one of the bags move. He then opened it only to find the other husband groggy, but alive in that bag. Rick opened the second bag, and there was Greta unconscious, but alive. The other husband came too, and opened the third bag to free his wife. The men tried to carry their wives out, but were soon discovered by the kidnappers. In their attempt to escape, they were intercepted by the kidnappers. A frantic chase ensued, ascending stairs until they reached the lobby. To their horror, the front door remained locked from the outside. Confronted by the same 4 men from the basement, the 2 couples found themselves in a dire situation. The strangers, still in hospital gowns, started to make their way slowly towards the 2 couples. A sudden crash heralded the entrance of the lobby. There were suddenly plenty of police officers who swiftly apprehended the kidnappers. Finally brought to the real part of the hospital, Rick, refusing to leave Greta's side, clung to her as if the harrowing experience had forever bound them together in the shadows of that surreal night.